In 1976, a band from Chicago that had been playing for a few years finally got around to releasing their first album on Passport Records, and unfortunately they wouldn't get around to releasing a second for another 6 years. But what an album! The band in question, Shadowfax, and from the album Watercourse Way, the track The Shape of a Word. Okay, I need to start trying to like count this. I cannot think of many tracks that just go right into it with this like pile driving cadence. It's like the riffage is like being thrown around by this kind of almost random drumming. This like all across the. It's almost like the riffing is kind of like trying to follow the pattern of the drumming. And it's like the drumming's going everywhere. Okay, now this track is written by Jay Stinson, and that fantastic who's responsible, of course, for electric guitar, 12-string, and classical guitar and sitar on the album. Although some of that not on this track necessarily. Okay, maybe we're going to get a bit of quiet, kind of serene passages here, because that was quite a lot of energy to be throwing a track right into it at the first second. That title seems like it would be right up the alley of people who are into graphic design. Because they're really like into typography and the shape of letters. And I briefly studied graphic design before I decided, nah, I'd rather be a writer. Now, I was about to say, was I? No, that's a keyboard. For a minute, I thought I was hearing two guitars. It's so funny how like the first few notes of a synthesizer will be kind of like fuzzy, slightly distorted, and like I'll for a minute think that I'm hearing like a guitar, like I'm hearing like sustained notes on like a fuzz tone or something. Oh, I love the way that those cymbals just kind of fade in as that kind of watery synth. Oh, hear that tinkling piano? Over that really circular bass line. Which I'm trying to count, but it's like changing counts every bar. It's hearing like doom 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 doom. Maybe it's like a bar of 5 and a bar of 6. Got some real clever two-handed piano playing. I'm hearing chords and I'm also hearing some tinkle. Really good, like, control, separation, and yet this is verging on free form. It's just like barely composed, some of these parts. This part anyway, I mean. God, the drumming is just really upping the bar on this. We've got fantastic, musicianship all around, but I mean, the drummer seems to be setting some patterns that are very difficult for like rock instrumentation to, smoldering. Yeah, I'm picturing lots of like smoke and just billowing. It's almost like the guitar is like fire, the cymbals are smoke, and the piano is water. Let's introduce a couple of the other guys. Electric bass, double bass, Cowbell, Phil Maggini. Drums, Stuart Nevitt. He also plays tabla, bongos, metallophone, and percussion elsewhere, I'd imagine. And keyboards are by Doug Maluchnik. And actually, on this entry, I'm getting what I always complain about not getting in other entries. I'm getting like the full list of makes and models of keyboards. We've got two keyboards here. We've got Doug Maluchnik and Chuck Greenberg, and they've both. Oh no! Well, Chuck Greenberg mostly plays woodwinds, and he plays like assorted instruments. But let's see, the keyboardist Maluchnik, he plays grand piano, electric piano, a Baldwin, and a Rhodes electric, synthesizer, ARP, 2600 and mini Moog, a sequencer, Oberheim digital, harpsichord, and Chamberlin. And Greenberg plays Lyricon synthesizer, electronic woodwind synthesizer, soprano saxophone, flute, oboe, recorder, and bass clarinet. Wow, got a really big arsenal of instrumentation for all these guys. I mean, I could just imagine what their rehearsal space must have looked like. Them all, having all these things on hand, and just to think that they formed and they were together for 4 years before they recorded this, and produced by Larry Fast. Great. So, God, Larry Fast was everywhere in 1976. He was producing this. He was releasing a Synergy album, the second one, and Sequencer. And he was also on Sylvia Robinson's self-titled Sylvia, the Red album that I did a video on a couple of months ago. Yeah, covered both those people, as a matter of fact. God, this band is so original in the way in their type of interplay and the way it's like partially structured and yet also kind of like verging on free form, and yet I'm actually hearing a lot more rock than jazz. Yeah, and it's so amazing how many bands were able to be creative with this like electrified instrumental maximalism around this time. I mean, yeah, they come up with a sound that's obviously somewhat influenced by the Mahavishnu Orchestra, yet doesn't, and yet the arrangements are just their own. That really smoky sound that's reverberating from the percussion. And the way that these guitar riffs just kind of fight themselves out of trouble, it's like they kind of like drill themselves kind of really down low, and then they just kind of spin their way out. Kind of sounds like a mellotron. These ivory runs over these more like kind of elongated chords, these like rising. And now we've basically got four guys, but what's really at the fore are two. We've got the kind of circular bass figure again, and the ivory tinkle over it, and then the like plucking guitar figure, a bit more subtle, and then and more subtle drumming. Or it might just be the same drumming, it's just that Larry Fast may have turned it down somewhat volume-wise. I think that's it. I think he's just playing the same way, it's just that they've downed him in the mix to make it more subtle. Oh, hear that sound, that high sound, that. It's like the piano's just kind of like sparkling over this like color. It's like color reflection on water. It's amazing how, like in this era, another thing I love is that even during subtle passages, the drummer would find ways to be really busy and to just put more beats in to these passages than most conventional pop rock drummers would even put into an entire song. I sometimes get the feeling that musicians of this era felt that if they weren't constantly busy with their hands, that they may have felt like they were perhaps, well, in a concert setting, loitering on stage, or in the studio, just not carrying their weight. And that's kind of a good attitude, really. It's like they, try and make yourselves useful as much as possible, Oh, now we're just really converging. It's amazing. We're kind of like converging on this figure, and yet overall, it's being so overpowered almost that what you're really just kind of hearing is it's almost like everything's just kind of like blending together, and there's a few sparks that are just coming out. There was a melody in there, kind of, or a figure in there, a few, but I can't really even hum it back because I was more just kind of noticing the whole. Yeah, it's like like that those chimes or whatever, sparkling in the dust. Ah. The Shape of a Word by Shadowfax from their 1976 debut album, Watercourse Way. Yes, on Passport Records, a great label at the time, had a lot of great acts on, including Larry Fast. And yeah, 5 very talented musicians making up this band. And beautiful cover as well, really rich in detail. Yeah, just everything. Yeah, detail is just the operative way of it's the operative creative word behind this band's aesthetic, both visually and sonically. And with all that energy, it's a little bit sad that they didn't follow it up within the next couple of years. They, of course, would go through a lot of changes by the time they entered their more prolific phase, starting in 1982 on Windham Hill Records. But that stuff is good in a different way, and that's a story for a whole different time. In the meantime, as a 70s era maximalist jazz rock symphonic band, though, they left one unparalleled classic that's just in a class of its own. Yes. For more Rubies and Sapphires from Watercourse Way, see the directory of albums from 1976 linked in the description below. Over 1,740 titles currently on that directory, the ultimate directory of albums from 1976, where you can find thousands of red tracks, thousands of purples to keep you busy for years across vast sections of the music scene. And Shadowfax can be seen, I think, like the 15th page or so, wherever SH would come up in the alphabet. Yeah, it's all alphabetical. Like and subscribe, follow me on social media, and leave a comment if there are any observations you have about this track, the nuances, the time signatures, the density, the interplay, the different instruments involved, the way they coalesced at times, the way they complemented one another, the way they interacted, the way they yielded to one another. Yeah, just from glorious, dense moments to just beautiful, subtle passages. And until next time, this is Zaragon, the world's most ear-traveled trimaximalist, signing off.